During the time of the draft, you always see players with red flags and character issues, failing a drug test, getting suspended or kicked off of the team, nobody attending your 21st birthday party. You get the idea. There are some red flags that are more blatant and obvious than others, and it's up to the teams to determine whether or not these red flags make the player undraftable in their eyes. But imagine a team drafting someone who is a prisoner. I'm not talking about someone who served time in jail before. I'm talking about someone who literally was in prison at the time of the draft and you had no idea when they'd be getting out. But that's exactly what the Bengals did with their first ever draft in 1968. And seeing as they have the first overall pick of today's draft, this feels like a good time to talk about one of the strangest draft choices ever at the time. Jess Phillips played for Michigan State in the mid-1960s, and was a defensive back on some of the greatest teams and defenses in program history. In 1965, he was a starter on the team that went 10-1, won the Big Ten, and was named the co-national champion. And in 1966, he was a starter on an undefeated team that split the national championship with Notre Dame. In those 2 seasons, his defenses recorded 4 shutouts and never allowed more than 20 points in a game. Entering his senior season, the Spartans as well as Phillips were riding high. However, things took a turn during his senior year when he forged his name on a check. As for why he did it, Phillips said afterwards that it was more of a childish prank than anything, and that it was a stupid move because he played on championship teams and could have gotten almost anything in East Lansing for nothing. However, this led to him getting sentenced to prison at the penitentiary in Jackson, Michigan, which was the largest walled prison in the world at the time. The length of the sentence was anywhere from 15 months to 14 years. At this point, his shot at getting drafted was seemingly down the drain. Even Phillips said likewise. He had given up hopes of ever playing football again, and was just hoping to go back to school and make something of himself. And yet on January 31st, 1968, when the Cincinnati Bengals had a 4th-round pick in the draft, they took Phillips. Even though they knew he was in prison, and even though they knew there was a chance that he wouldn't get out until 1981. Why did the Bengals make the pick? Paul Brown said that he didn't make the situation an issue with the team. Since they were an expansion team and were starting from nothing, and were being thrown into a draft involving NFL teams as well, Brown said that they might have to take risks that other teams might not have to take. So not knowing what his future held, Phillips was drafted by the Bengals. Turns out, this huge leap of faith by Brown paid off big time. Phillips was paroled after 4 months and was released on August 2nd of the same year. Immediately, Mike Brown picked up Phillips and took him straight to training camp. He made 3 interceptions during the 1968 season as a rookie, but in the 1969 offseason, the Bengals switched him to halfback, and the move paid off. For the next 4 seasons in Cincinnati, he had 1,860 rushing yards, and in 1970, the Sporting News named him a first-team All-AFC selection, where he ran for 648 yards and 4 touchdowns. And Phillips would play in the league until 1977, spending time with the Saints, Raiders, and Patriots. Unfortunately, things went south after he retired. After his retirement, he wrote some more bad checks worth over $3,000, and served 3 years in prison. And in 1982, he was sentenced to 15 years in the Nevada State Prison for robbing a jewelry store in Reno. However, in terms of his time in the NFL and his time with the Bengals, nothing came up off the field. I can't imagine any team today spending a draft pick on a guy who's in prison who has no idea when he's getting out. If no team bit the bullet on Lael Collins in the draft, who didn't even do anything, I can't even imagine any team taking a chance on a guy like Jess Phillips today. But the 4th round of the first draft that the Bengals had was definitely a weird one that somehow ended up paying off.